Gilda Faliero thought the worst part tonight would be scrubbing lipstick out of bed sheets and hauling laundry bags through the rain behind the hotel. She was wrong. For men dragged her into a narrow alley, tore at her maid uniform, and the black leather bag clutched her chest, then kicked her leg until bone gave way. They left her on the wet pavement, dress soaked, fingers numb, whispering, "Help me, I cannot walk," into the roar of the storm. She begged the shadow coming toward her not to hurt her again. The man in the maroon suit had not come to hurt her. Gustavo Faliero, the unseen owner of the luxury hotel where she worked, had come to make every person who touched his maid regret it. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's go back to hours before, where it all started. Hours earlier, the night had only been exhausting. On the service level of the Faliero Regent, the air was thick with steam from the kitchens and the smell of bleach from freshly mopped floors. Pots clanged, someone shouted for more plates, and the service elevator doors kept opening and closing with a tired groan. Down here, there were no crystal chandeliers, only buzzing strip lights and narrow corridors lined with gray doors. Gilda pushed a housekeeping cart along the hallway, the wheels bumping over cracked tiles. Her black dress and white apron were already smudged from a long shift. The lace at the hem brushed her knees as she walked, and every step sent a dull ache up her calves. She had been on her feet since early afternoon, cleaning suites after a conference, and then staying late when a wedding party demanded extra rooms. No one noticed how long she had been working. That was normal. Guests rarely looked at the maids who changed their sheets and collected their empty bottles. Most staff barely knew her name. She was the quiet one, the girl from somewhere else who smiled, nodded, and did not complain. At the end of the corridor, the supervisor waited with her clipboard. "Room 1812 is done," she asked without looking up. "Yes," Gilda said. "Fresh towels, new sheets, everything signed." The supervisor ticked a box and moved on. "No thanks. No good job." Gilda had not expected any. She moved her cart back toward the laundry chute, humming under her breath to keep herself awake. Her mind drifted to her family. Part of her salary went to the small apartment where her father lived, paying for medicine that kept him stable. The rest covered the workers' dorm room she shared with two other maids and a little envelope she kept hidden in her locker, saving for the day she could study something else. Each week, she told herself she would add more to that envelope. Each week, the numbers did not stretch as far as she hoped. She knew there was another side to this building. Men in suits arrived through the private garage, passed through guarded doors, and into rooms where decisions were made. She had never seen inside those rooms, but she knew one name: Gustavo Faliero. Guests whispered it whenever they tried to guess who owned the hotel. Staff spoke it only in the break room, eyes checking for cameras that did not exist. Gilda had seen him a handful of times, moving through the lobby like he belonged to every inch of it. Dark hair, cropped neat, trimmed beard, eyes that seemed to weigh a person in a single glance. The maid straightened when he walked by, but she kept her head down, pretending to study the floor. At work, she never said his name. It felt like speaking to a storm. By the time the kitchen slowed and the last banquet plates were stacked, the clock above the staff cafeteria blinked 1:20. Gilda returned her card to the storage room and rubbed the back of her neck. Her shoulders throbbed. She wanted hot water and silence. She was almost at the lockers when a familiar voice stopped her. "Gilda." She turned. The night manager stood by the office doorway, a man in his 40s with tired eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. He was known for being firm but fair. When new staff arrived, he was the one who explained the rules and showed them where to find spare uniforms. Gilda had always been grateful that he spoke to her politely. He held a black leather bag in one hand, the kind of bag wealthy guests carried. The handles were looped around his fingers. "I need a favor," he said. "You live in the dorm building, yes?" "Yes, sir," she replied. "Good. Take this to the dorm office on your way. The clerk is waiting for it. Do not open it. Do not hand it to anyone else. Straight to the office, you understand?" Gilda stepped closer and took the bag. Its weight surprised her. It pulled at her shoulder more than a bag of folded sheets should. Something solid shifted inside. "What is it?" she asked before she could stop herself. Just paperwork and petty cash, he answered quickly. His smile flickered for a second, then settled back onto his face. Nothing for you to worry about. You're trustworthy, Gilda. That is why I asked you. A compliment. That was rare. She nodded. I will take it now. As she turned away, she noticed a security guard sitting on a chair near the loading dock door. He seemed relaxed, scrolling through his phone, but his eyes lifted to the bag and then to her. Gilda told herself it was nothing. Important things passed through these corridors all the time. In the cramped locker room, she changed from her work shoes into worn sneakers and pulled a thin raincoat over her uniform. The mirror over the sink showed her pale face and dark hair sticking to her temples. She wiped away a smear of lipstick from her cheek, collected her few belongings, and slung the bag over her shoulder. The staff exit opened with a metallic creak. Cold air swept in, sharp with the smell of wet trash and exhaust fumes. Outside, the alley behind the hotel glistened under yellow streetlights, the rain falling in steady sheets. Water pooled in the uneven pavement, turning potholes into small mirrors that reflected the hotel's rear windows. Gilda hesitated under the awning, pulling the hood of her coat up. Her usual route to the dorms took her around the front of the building, past the taxi rank and late-night food stalls. It was brighter there, full of drivers chatting and vendors calling out for business. Tonight, though, her legs felt like they belonged to someone twice her age. The narrow lane that cut across the block would be faster. She peered out into the rain. A figure leaned against the wall near the loading bay, smoking, but workers often took their breaks there. Another shadow moved briefly farther down, then disappeared behind a stack of crates. You are tired, she told herself. Stop imagining things. She stepped into the alley. Rain soaked through the thin fabric almost at once. It drummed on the metal fire escapes above and ran down the sides of overflowing dumpsters. The hotel's generators hummed on the other side of the wall, a low, constant vibration under her feet. She hugged the bag to her chest to keep it dry, careful not to slip in the larger puddles. For a dozen steps, she heard only her own movements and the distant rush of cars from the main road. Then she caught a different rhythm behind her. Heavy boots splashing in water. Another set, lighter but quick, fell into time with the first. Gilda's grip tightened on the strap. She told herself not to look back. People use this alley all the time. The dorms housed cooks, cleaners, drivers, and guards. Someone else might simply be heading home. Evening. The voice came from her left, a few meters ahead. Gilda stopped. A man stepped out from behind a stack of crates. He was bald, his skull gleaming wet under the streetlight, a jagged scar running from his temple to his cheek. A sleeveless leather jacket clung to his muscular arms, and rain rolled off his shoulders. Before she could speak, another shape emerged beside him. This one had thick curly black hair and a rough beard. A dark hoodie hid most of his face, but his eyes watched her like a hunter watches a cornered animal. Behind her, footsteps closed in. When she turned her head, she saw a tall man in a dark blue bomber jacket blocking the way back to the hotel. Further behind him, a fourth man leaned casually against the brick wall, black leather jacket zipped halfway up, lips curved into a lazy smirk. His eyes were flat and interested, as if this was entertainment. The bald man nodded at the bag. You are carrying something that belongs to someone else. Gilda swallowed. This is for the dorm office. I am just delivering it. That is right, the bearded man said softly. You deliver it to us. Then you can go. Fear climbed her spine. The bag seemed to gain weight in her arms. In that moment, she could have dropped it and possibly walked away, but the thought of losing her job clenched around her ribs like a fist. I cannot, she whispered. They will know I lost it. Please let me pass. The man in the bomber jacket laughed behind her. She thinks anyone will care what happens to her. A rough hand shot out and seized her wrist. The bald man yanked the strap of the bag at the same time, dragging her forward. Gilda stumbled. Water splashed up over her shoes. She tried to pull back, fingers locked around the leather, but his grip tightened until her bones screamed. Stop, she gasped. You are hurting me. He pushed her. Her back hit the wall, knocking the breath from her lungs. Pain flared between her shoulder blades. The bearded man stepped in close, crowding her, his breath hot despite the cold rain. "Last chance," he murmured. "Let go." She clung to the bag as if it were a rope keeping her from drowning. "Forget the job," a voice in her head begged, but it was too late. The man behind her kicked the back of her knees. She dropped, hitting the ground hard. Her right knee slammed into the pavement, sending a jolt up her thigh. Before she could get her hands beneath her, another boot swung out. This one caught her left leg at the shin. There was a horrible cracking sound, sharp as a snapped branch. Pain exploded white-hot, tearing a scream from her throat. The alley spun. For a moment, she could not breathe. They tore the bag from her hands while she curled around her leg, instinctively trying to protect it. The smirking man walked forward at last, taking the bag and unzipping it. Paper, envelopes, and a metal cash box glinted under the streetlight. "You see," he said, almost amused. "Worth the trouble." Gilda tried to pull herself up by one elbow. Her leg refused to bear even the idea of weight. Agony pulsed with every heartbeat, spreading up through her hip and into her spine. "Please," she cried, voice breaking. "Help me. I cannot walk." None of them looked at her. "Take her phone," the bald man said. "We do not need her calling anyone." The bearded one crouched and patted her coat pocket. She swatted weakly at his hands, but he slapped her arm aside and tossed the small phone into a puddle, grinding it under his boot until the screen shattered. "Leave her," the man in the bomber jacket muttered. "She will not get far like that." They moved away, arguing about where to open the cash box. Their voices blurred into the noise of the storm. Gilda lay alone on the cold ground, rain hitting her face like needles. Her apron was soaked and streaked with dirt, her hair plastered to her cheeks. She tried once more to sit up and almost blacked out from the pain. The world narrowed to the sound of falling water and the frantic beat of her heart. She thought of her father, of the small envelope of savings in her locker, of the way the hotel lights always looked so calm from the outside. This alley felt like another country. Then a new sound cut through the night. The deep growl of an engine. Headlights swept briefly across the far end of the lane before the vehicle turned and stopped. A car door opened with a heavy thud. Footsteps began to move toward them, slow and deliberate, the kind of walk that did not hurry for anyone. The four men turned first. Gilda saw their shoulders stiffen. The smirk slipped from one mouth. She could not see clearly through the rain, but she recognized the silhouette that stepped into the light. Tall, broad chest outline beneath a maroon suit now darkened by water, collar open over the edge of a tattoo that crawled up his throat. His gaze moved from the group of men to the black leather bag in their hands, and finally to the small figure crumpled at their feet. Every muscle in his face hardened. Gilda squeezed her eyes shut in terror. "Please," she whispered, exhausted. "Do not hurt me again." The footsteps came closer. The scent of his cologne, sharp and clean, cut through the sour smell of trash and rain. A warm hand touched her cheek, gentle in a way that did not match the rage she could feel rolling off him. "Gilda," he said, his voice low and rough. She forced her eyes open. Gustavo Faliero stared down at her, fury and something that looked too much like fear burning in his dark eyes. Behind him, men from the SUV moved into position, forming a silent wall. Gustavo's gaze swept over her twisted leg, the torn uniform, the broken phone. When he looked back at the attackers, the alley seemed to drop a few degrees. "Move away from her," he ordered. They hesitated, then one tried to bluff, lifting the bag. "We did not know she was yours, Faliero. We can talk." "You touched my maid," Gustavo said. "There is nothing to talk about." His men surged forward. In seconds, the bag was wrenched free and the four attackers were driven back against the wall. The sounds that followed were a mixture of grunts and choked cries and the dull impact of fists on flesh. Gilda heard them as if through water, distant and unreal. Gustavo knelt beside her, ignoring the rain soaking his suit. "I'm taking you to a doctor," he told her quietly. "Hold on to me. This will hurt, but I will not drop you." He slid his arms beneath her, lifting her carefully. Pain flared bright enough to steal her breath, but his grip was firm, his chest steady beneath her cheek. As he carried her toward the waiting car, he did not look back at the men on the ground. Make sure those four never forget this night, he said to his bodyguards, voice cold. The alley, the rain, and the echo of her own broken plea faded as the car door closed behind them and the city lights blurred outside the window. The night that had begun with lipstick stains and laundry had just torn Gilda Fallero's life in two. She felt it in the way the car lurched forward, in the way every bump in the road sent a hot spear up her shattered leg. The city outside the tinted window was only streaks of light and rain. She clung to the front of Gustavo's suit with one hand, afraid that if she let go, she would slide straight out of her own body. Stay with me, he murmured. We are almost there. His voice sounded far away. Her head rested against his chest, hearing the heavy thud of his heartbeat under the wet fabric. Someone in the front seat spoke into a phone, giving directions that blurred into noise. Gilda tried to focus on the rhythm of the wipers, on the warmth of the arm around her shoulders. Her stomach rolled. The taste of metal coated her tongue. Gustavo, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop it. Not Signore Faliero. Not boss. Just his name, raw and familiar. His grip tightened. I am here. The car slowed, then turned sharply. Gravel crunched under the tires. When it stopped, the driver jumped out and opened the rear door. Cold air rushed in. Lights flashed above them. Not bright hospital lights, but small lamps mounted under the eaves of an older building. Two men in plain clothes ran out carrying a stretcher. They did not ask questions when they saw who stepped from the car. Their eyes widened and they bowed their heads. Boss, one of them said. The doctor is waiting. Gustavo climbed out first, still holding Gilda, and laid her carefully on the stretcher. Pain flared up her side and she gasped, grabbing for him. Gus, do not let them take me, she choked. He leaned over her, his face a blur framed by rain and light. I'm coming in with you. They answered to me. You are safe. The stretcher rolled over a threshold and into a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and fresh paint. The walls were a dull cream, the floor polished but not new. This was not a public hospital. It felt more like a private clinic that pretended to be nothing special from the street. A woman in a white coat stepped forward, her hair pulled back, eyes sharp. What happened? She asked. Multiple blows to the left leg, Gustavo answered, walking beside the stretcher. She cannot bear weight. Possibly broken. She took kicks to the ribs as well. Check for internal damage. The doctor nodded, already studying Gilda. We will take care of her, Signore Faliero. The way she said his name came with a weight that told Gilda she knew exactly who he was. The nurses behind her straightened, their movements quick and careful. No one questioned why the owner of a luxury hotel was soaking the hallway while they rushed to treat a maid. They wheeled Gilda into a small examination room. A nurse cut away the ruined stocking and rolled up her dress. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood when the nurse touched her swollen leg. We need x-rays, the doctor said. Now. They transferred her to a narrow bed that rattled as it moved. The ceiling lights above her flickered past. She stared at them, counting each panel to keep from screaming. In the radiology room, they slid a plate beneath her leg. This will be quick, a technician said. Do not move. Not moving was impossible. Even breathing felt like knives. She held on anyway, fingers digging into the sides of the table. Each click of the machine groaned through her bones. When it was over, they returned her to the examination room. The doctor studied the images on a screen. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. Fracture in 2 places, she said quietly. Tibia and fibula. We will set it tonight. Gilda heard the words as if they belonged to someone else. 2 places. Set it. Tonight. They sounded like instructions for a broken piece of furniture, not her own body. Gustavo came closer and took her hand. His palm was warm, slightly rough. You will walk again, he told her. I give you my word. Something inside her loosened at the certainty in his tone. She believed him even as fear tried to claw its way up her throat. They gave her something through a needle in her arm. The edges of the room softened. Voices slid in and out of focus. She heard a saw in the distance and realized, hazily, that it cut plaster, not bone. They were preparing the cast. During the procedure, the doctor spoke in calm, steady phrases. Gilda felt pressure and movement, but the worst of the pain dulled to a heavy ache. She watched the faces around her. Nurses worked with quiet efficiency. Every time they glanced at Gustavo, their eyes dropped in respect. "Hold her steady," the doctor said as they aligned the bones. Gilda turned her head. Gustavo was standing so close she could see the rain still clinging to his beard. His hand never left her shoulder. "It is all right, Gilda," he murmured. "Think of home. Think of your father." Her lips moved without sound. The room blurred. For a moment, another scene slid over this one. A small chapel on the edge of the city. Fading flowers and vases beside a worn altar. Gustavo standing in a plain dark suit, not the expensive one he wore to meetings, holding a simple silver ring between his fingers. No guests from the hotel, no relatives from her side, just a priest who did not ask questions and two of Gustavo's men standing like statues by the door. He had taken her hands and said, "This is the safest way. If they do not know who you are to me, they cannot use you against me." She had believed him then too. The memory faded as the doctor wrapped her leg in layers of padding and plaster. When they were finished, she lay propped up on a pillow, the cast still wet and heavy. Someone draped a blanket over her. Her skin felt clammy, but the shivers had eased. "She needs rest," the doctor said. "The bones are set. No internal bleeding that we can see, but we will monitor her tonight." She was lucky. Gustavo's jaw tightened. "Lucky is not the word I would choose." The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "We will keep her comfortable, boss." A nurse adjusted Gilda's foreline and checked her blood pressure. Another brought a warm cloth and gently wiped the rain and dirt from her face. They were careful, almost reverent, in the way they handled her. No one called her girl or maid. They looked at her the way people looked at something important. Sleep tugged at her, but curiosity pushed back. Why were they suddenly treating her like someone who mattered? A nurse stepped out and returned with a clipboard. "We need to list her as a patient of record," she said. "What name should we use?" "Gilda Faliero," Gustavo replied at once. The nurse glanced up, surprised. "Family." He did not look away from Gilda when he answered. "My wife." The word landed softly, almost swallowed by the hum of machines, but Gilda heard it. Warmth rushed to her chest that had nothing to do with the medicine. The nurse blinked once, then wrote quickly. "Of course, Signore Faliero. We will note it." When the staff left them alone for a moment, Gilda turned her head. "You did not have to say that," she whispered. "It is the truth," he said. His expression softened for a heartbeat, then hardened again as voices rose in the corridor. Two of his bodyguards entered, clothing still damp from the alley. One had a cut on his forehead, the other a bruise forming along his cheekbone. They nodded respectfully to Gilda, then focused on Gustavo. "We have them," the taller one reported. "All four. They tried to run, but we caught them before they reached the main road." "Where are they now?" Gustavo asked. "In the warehouse," the other replied. "Tied and waiting." Gilda's stomach clenched. She imagined the men who had kicked her lying in some dark place, faces bleeding, and felt no sympathy. Yet the thought of what Gustavo might do to them made her skin prickle. "How close was that alley to the back entrance?" Gustavo asked. His voice was quiet, which was always worse than when he shouted. "Too close," the first guard admitted. "Barely 20 meters from the service door." 20 meters, Gustavo repeated. His hand curled into a fist at his side. "And no one saw four strangers waiting there with nothing to do but watch my staff walk by." The guard dropped his gaze. "We were checking the cameras. Some were down for maintenance." "Convenient." He stepped away from Gilda's bed and paced once across the small room, water from his shoes leaving dark marks on the floor. "I want names," he said. "Anyone who knew she would be carrying that bag. Anyone who knew which route she takes home. Every guard on duty tonight. Every manager who signed off on the delivery." "We are already making a list," the shorter guard said. "The men we caught claimed someone inside told them when to wait." Gilda's breath hitched. Inside the hotel, Gustavo halted beside her, anger flashing across his face before he smoothed it away. "Do not think about that now," he told her. "You need to rest." "But if there is someone inside," she insisted, voice thin, "the others could be in danger. The maids, the cooks. They walk that same alley." His eyes softened for a moment. I will protect them. I swear it. Ow, she whispered. The edges of her vision darkened. Without starting a war, he opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if there were things he could not explain to her while she was lying in a hospital gown. He reached forward and smoothed the damp hair from her forehead. Sleep, he said gently. When you wake, we will talk. She wanted to argue, but the medication finally pulled her under. Her last conscious sensation was the weight of his hand on hers and the echo of the alley in her mind. The crack of bone, the taste of rain. In sleep, she saw the four men again, their faces blurred, circling. No matter how she tried to move, her legs would not respond. The sound of their boots turned into the ticking of a clock. Somewhere beyond the dream, a voice demanded answers. Another promised pain. She woke briefly to the murmur of conversation at the doorway. Gustavo was speaking in a low voice to someone on the phone, his silhouette dark against the dim light of the hallway. I want to know who put that bag in her hands, he said. Managers, accountants, anyone with a key to that office. Check their calls. Someone directed those men. I want proof before I decide what to do. The phone at his ear crackled with a distant reply. Her eyes drifted shut again. She did not know how much time passed before she woke properly. The room was quieter. The clock on the wall showed it was still night, but the rain on the window had softened to a drizzle. Her leg throbbed inside the cast, a deep, stubborn ache. Gustavo sat in a chair beside the bed, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. The lines around his eyes looked deeper. A half-empty cup of coffee cooled on the side table. His phone vibrated against his palm. He looked at the screen and answered at once. Talk. Gilda watched his face as he listened. His jaw clenched. So, it is confirmed, he said finally. Someone from inside. The voice on the other end spoke again, more urgently this time. Gustavo's gaze flicked to Gilda, checking if she was asleep. She closed her eyes halfway, but not enough to miss his next words. You already have a name? He asked. There was a pause. His hand tightened around the phone. Good. Keep them where they are. I am on my way. He ended the call and sat very still for a moment, the only sound the steady beep of the monitor at Gilda's side. She wanted to ask who it was, which familiar face had traded her safety for money or favor. Her lips parted, but exhaustion dragged her back down. The question hung between them as the room faded, unanswered, while Gustavo Faliero rose from the chair and walked into the dark hallway, carrying that name with him. Sleep dragged Gilda under again. When she next opened her eyes, the light was different. Softer, warmer. No monitor beeped at her side. The smell of antiseptic had been replaced by something cleaner and more familiar. A mix of coffee, polished wood, and the faint trace of Gustavo's cologne. She lay on a wide bed, her left leg heavy inside a white cast propped on stacked pillows. Sunlight seeped through sheer curtains, turning the room a pale gold. A low shelf ran along one wall with rows of books and a single framed photograph of the sea at dusk. On the table beside her sat a glass of water, a folded cloth, and a small dish with pain tablets set neatly in the center. This was not the clinic. This was his home. She turned her head, every movement slow. The room around her was spacious, but not crowded. Dark furniture, cream walls, a rug soft beneath her fingertips when she let her hand drift to the edge of the bed. On a chair near the window, someone had placed a black leather bag, clean of alley dirt, but still carrying a subtle crease where her fingers had once clung to it. Seeing it sent a shiver through her chest. The alley rose in her mind. Rain, boots, the snap of bone. She sucked in a breath and looked away. Her gaze moved instead to a small tray on a cabinet. A simple silver ring lay there, resting where she always left it at night when they were alone. Gustavo must have removed it at the clinic before they worked on her leg. The sight of it steadied her. She reached for the water, then flinched as her muscles protested. The movement knocked the bag on the chair slightly. It tilted, and a slip of paper peeked from the side pocket. That small shift was enough to drag her thoughts backward. The first time she had seen that bag, she had not known what it carried, just as she had not known what kind of man really stood behind the hotel's polished front. Her mind slid back, away from the bed and the cast, to the day she met him. Asterisk. Months earlier, Gilda had been the newest maid in the Faliero Regent, more afraid of losing her job than of the rumors that whispered along the service corridors. She had arrived with a single suitcase and a promise to herself: stay quiet, work hard, do not stand out. On her third week, she was assigned to the executive lounge on the top floor, a place where important guests drank coffee and held loud conversations over city views. She had been careful, moving between tables with steady hands, picking up cups before they spilled, staying invisible, until the tray slipped. One careless step, one wet ring of condensation on the floor, and the tray tilted. A cup of hot coffee slid toward the edge. She grabbed for it, fingers closing on thin air. The cup toppled, and a dark stream splashed across the white shirt of a man in a sharp suit. Everything froze. The man stood slowly, eyes going from a stained shirt to her face. He was older than most guests, his hair streaked with gray at the temples, his tie knotted tight. Rage climbed his neck like a flush. "You useless girl," he snapped. "Look what you have done." "I am so sorry," Gilda stammered, already reaching for napkins. "I can clean it. I will pay for the shirt if I can just have time, please." His hand rose. For a heartbeat, she thought he meant to brush off the liquid. Then she realized he intended to hit her. The room seemed to tilt. Other guests looked away, suddenly fascinated by their phones or the view. The slap never landed. A different hand caught the guest's wrist mid-swing. The man who had stepped between them was taller, broader, his grip firm but controlled. He wore a dark suit and an open collar, as if he had dressed for a meeting and only half cared about the impression he gave. His hair was neatly cut, his beard trimmed close to his jaw. Gilda recognized him from glimpses in the lobby and from the way staff changed their posture when he passed. "Gustavo Faliero. Touch my staff, and you will pay for more than a shirt," Gustavo said quietly. The guest's face drained of color. "Your staff?" "She ruined a €500 shirt." "Then send the bill to my office," Gustavo replied. "She will continue working here." He released the man's wrist and turned to Gilda. His eyes met hers for the first time, dark and steady. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, throat too tight to speak. "Good. Clean the table. Then take 5 minutes in the kitchen to calm down," he said. There was no softness in his tone, only a firm instruction, but it felt like mercy. Later that day, her supervisor pulled her aside. "Do you know who that was?" The supervisor hissed, more anxious than angry. "That was the owner. We're close enough. Whatever he says, we do. He wants you to stay, so you stay. Do not give him a reason to regret it." Gilda had nodded, dazed. She expected a warning in Gustavo's eyes the next time she saw him, something that said he would not protect her twice. Instead, over the next weeks, their paths crossed in small moments. Sometimes it was in the corridor outside the conference rooms where he held private meetings. She would step out of a supply closet with fresh linens to find him walking past, phone pressed to his ear. He would dip his head in greeting, a small acknowledgement that he remembered who she was. Other nights, long after most guests had gone to bed, she would be polishing tables in a meeting room when he came in with 2 or 3 men. They would talk in low voices about shipments and numbers, names she did not recognize. Gilda kept her head down and her ears closed, but she could not help noticing details. The way he listened more than he spoke, the way the others waited for his judgment. Once, he arrived alone, rubbing his temples as if a headache had taken root behind his eyes. She had been stacking chairs. Without thinking, she asked coffee. He looked up in surprise. "You know how to make it properly?" "Yes," she said. "My father taught me." He gestured to the sideboard. "Then yes, please." She brewed a pot, hand steady this time, and poured him a cup. The rich scent filled the room. "Thank you, signore," she said, placing it in front of him. "Gustavo is fine when we are alone," he replied. The word lodged in her chest. "Alone." She nodded, not trusting herself to use his name out loud just yet. On another late night, as she wiped down the long table, he asked casually, "Where's home for you, Gilda?" She told him about a small town far from the city, about her father's illness, about a younger brother who still tried to finish school. She did not speak often of these things. Her roommates at the dorms were kind, but busy with their own troubles. Gustavo listened, elbows resting on the table, eyes focused on her face as if nothing outside the room mattered. "And you?" she asked hesitantly. "Do you have family?" "Some," he said after a pause. "Most of them gone. The rest scattered. The hotel is what I have now." He did not mention the syndicate by name, but she caught the weight behind his words. Power, responsibility, loneliness. Their conversation ended when one of his men knocked on the door to deliver documents. Still, the thread between them had been tied. Weeks turned into months. She heard stories among the staff about what happened to people who crossed him. A supplier who tried to cheat on invoices suddenly stopped coming by. A security guard who took bribes from outsiders vanished from duty without explanation. Yet the man she saw late at night was not only the shadow in those stories. He was the one who sent extra food trays to the kitchen when staff worked double shifts. The one who arranged a doctor for a dishwasher's sick child. The first time she glimpsed the truly dangerous side of his world came on a night when she should have been asleep. She had finished her floor early and went down to the laundry to help fold sheets. On her way back up, she realized she had left her key card in the staff lounge. Instead of taking the main corridor, she cut through the loading dock, intending to reach the lounge more quickly. Voices echoed off the concrete walls. Harsh, angry. She froze behind a stack of crates. 3 men she did not recognize were kneeling on the ground, hands tied behind their backs. Their faces were bruised, shirts torn. Gustavo stood in front of them, back to her, flanked by 2 of his lieutenants. A 3rd man lay groaning near the wall, clutching his ribs. "You thought you could skim from my shipments and sell to my rivals," Gustavo said, his tone almost conversational. "You used my name and my dock to steal from me." One of the kneeling men spat blood onto the floor. "You cannot control every street in this city." Gustavo shrugged. "Perhaps not, but I can control what happens on mine." He nodded once. His men moved forward. Gilda did not stay to see more. Heart hammering, she slipped backward the way she had come and pressed her back to the cold wall outside, breathing hard. That night, her view of him shifted. He was not just the man who had blocked a slap in the lounge or accepted her coffee. He was the one who decided which betrayals could be forgiven and which required punishment. Later, he found her. She was in the corridor outside the staff lounge, clutching her key card with trembling fingers when he appeared at the corner. His suit jacket was off, sleeves rolled up. There was a smear of someone else's blood on his cuff. "You should not have been in the dock," he said quietly. "I forgot my card," she answered, voice thin. "I took a shortcut." "How much did you see?" "Enough." He studied her for a long moment. She waited for the threat, the warning to keep silent or leave. Instead, he said, "You have 2 choices." Her throat tightened. "I can give you money and send you away tonight," he continued. "A good amount. Enough to keep your family comfortable for a while. You will forget this place and everything you have heard." "And the other choice?" she asked. "You stay," he said. "You keep working here. You do not ask questions about what I do downstairs. You follow my rules, and in return I make sure no one touches you, no matter what they think they can get away with." The memory of the raised hand in the lounge burned at the back of her mind. Her father's labored breaths over the phone were never far from her thoughts. Leaving with money would keep him safe for a year, maybe 2. Staying would mean walking corridors that hid violence in their shadows, but also meant a kind of protection she had never had before. "I will stay," she whispered. He nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Then from now on, you are under my protection. If anyone mistreats you, you come to me. Understand?" "Yes," she said. Over the next months, his promise proved real. When a supervisor tried to assign her twice the workload of others, the schedule changed quietly. When a male guest cornered her in a hallway, a security guard appeared almost at once, apologizing and guiding the guest away. Gilda never doubted who had given those orders. Sometimes he watched her work from a distance, expression unreadable. Sometimes he asked if she was eating enough, if her family needed anything. Little by little, fear and gratitude folded into something warmer. The push toward marriage came after a group of drunk men from a private party followed her into a service stairwell and would not let her pass. They did not touch her, stopped by the arrival of one of Gustavo's men, but their slurred words stayed with her all night. Gustavo had listened to her shaken explanation in his office, fingers drumming once on the desk. Then he said, "Keeping you off their radar is not enough. I need something stronger tying you to me, so even my own people remember who you are." A week later, in a small chapel on the edge of the city, they stood side by side. The priest spoke the words with tired gentleness. Two of Gustavo's closest men served as witnesses, their faces solemn. Gilda wore a simple cream dress, her hands cold but steady. Gustavo slid a ring onto her finger and promised, "No one outside this room needs to know what you are to me. That is how I keep you safe." He insisted she continue working as a maid. "If you suddenly disappear from the staff lists, it will raise questions," he said. "But if you stay, if you live like them, no one will think to look closer. You will always have guards nearby, even when you cannot see them." She had agreed, trusting that he knew his world better than she did. Now, lying in his bed with her leg in a cast, she was not so sure. A sound at the door pulled her back to the present. Gilda blinked, the image of the chapel fading. Voices came from the hallway outside her room. Gustavo's, low and sharp, and another man's, one of his captains. She did not catch every word, but the tension in his tone slid under the door like cold air. "You are certain?" Gustavo demanded. "Yes," the other man replied. "We checked the call records and the security logs. The leak came from inside the hotel, just like we thought." Gilda shifted slightly, careful not to disturb her leg, straining to hear. "The person who sold her route," Gustavo said, his voice hardening, "works on staff level 3. Someone she sees almost every day." Her heart lurched. A familiar face flashed in her mind. A colleague at the laundry, a supervisor, the night manager with the tired eyes. She tried to hear the name that followed. The captain started to speak, but a door farther down the hall opened with a loud click. Their voices dropped at once, swallowed by the short burst of noise. The next thing she heard was footsteps moving away. The name that had almost reached her never did. Gilda stared at the ceiling, fingers curling in the blanket. The idea that someone from her own world, someone who passed her in the corridors and joked over shared meals, had pointed those 4 men toward her settled over her chest like a weight. Whoever it was, they had not just betrayed the boss. They had betrayed the maid who had trusted them. Gilda barely slept after that. When she did drift off, she dreamed of faces half hidden by rain, of voices whispering in corridors she knew well. Each time she woke, her heartbeat thundered in her ears, and the memory of the alley rose through the dark like cold water. Morning came slowly. A faint gray light pressed against the curtains, and the steady patter of rain tapped against the balcony doors. The city below was muted by the storm, its traffic distant, like waves rolling in and out of reach. Gilda blinked up at the ceiling, disoriented for a moment. Then she felt the weight of the cast on her leg and remembered where she was. Gustavo sat beside her, slouched in a chair, his elbows on his knees and his head bowed. His suit jacket hung over the back of the chair. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing the tattoo on his forearm and fading smears of dried rain and dirt. He looked like he had not slept at all. She shifted slightly. The movement must have caught his attention, because he lifted his head instantly, eyes sharpening even through exhaustion. "You are awake," he said softly. Gilda's throat felt dry. He reached for the glass of water on the nightstand, slid an arm behind her shoulders, and helped her lean forward. He guided the glass to her lips, steadying her hand with his. It was the kind of motion that spoke of practice, not awkwardness. "Small sips," he murmured. "Do not rush." When she settled back against the pillows, he adjusted them without asking, raising them enough to ease the pressure on her spine. She watched him silently. His touch was gentle, his face set in lines carved by worry. "You have done this before," she said quietly. He hesitated, then sat down again. "I've taken care of injured people before. It is not something I wanted you to see." Gilda let that sit for a moment. Then she asked the question she had been holding since the clinic. "What did you do to those 4 men?" His jaw worked once, and he looked toward the rain-slicked balcony glass. "They will never come near you again." "That is not an answer. It is the only one you need." She swallowed. "Did anyone else get hurt?" A long pause stretched between them. "My men handled them," he said. "No one on our side was seriously injured." The way he phrased it told her plenty without saying it. She imagined the bruised faces of the attackers when they were dragged past her in the alley. She imagined the quiet warehouse where Gustavo's men did things the hotel would never acknowledge above ground. She did not flinch, but neither did she look away. "You cannot keep avoiding the truth," she whispered. Something in his expression flickered, the calm slipping for a breath. "What I avoid," he replied, voice tightening, "is giving you more nightmares." Gilda steadied herself on the blanket, ignoring the throb in her leg. "Gustavo, if we were going to talk about nightmares, then let us talk about the reason I was alone in that alley. Why did none of the staff know who I am? Why did no guard know to watch me? If they had known I was your wife, they would have protected me." His head snapped toward her more sharply than she expected. "And that is exactly why they cannot know." "Why?" "Because telling anyone puts a target on your back," he said, the words cracking with frustration. "You are safe when no one knows what you mean to me. That is how it must be." "It did not keep me safe last night," she said. His breath caught. For a moment he looked ready to argue again, but the fight drained out of him. He rubbed a hand over his face, weary and tense. "You think I have not asked myself that?" he said quietly. "You think I am not reliving every second of what happened to you? I was 20 meters away, Gilda. 20. She softened a little at the anguish in his tone, but she did not back down. "Then tell me why you hide me. Really?" He leaned back in the chair, his eyes fixed on the rain, as if the answer lived somewhere beyond the glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, pulled from a place deeper than anger. "There was someone once," he said, "a girl in the family. My cousin Leah. She was 16 when it happened." Gilda stilled. "She went to a party one night," he continued. "A birthday for one of her friends. Nothing dangerous. She asked me to walk her home after. I told her I was busy with meetings, that one of my men would take her back. She trusted me. She trusted the man I sent." He exhaled slowly, a breath that trembled despite his effort to keep it steady. "The bodyguard left her alone for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. He took a call, stepped away, thought she would be safe standing under a streetlight. A rival crew was watching. They grabbed her and beat her in an alley before anyone noticed. By the time my man realized she was gone, it was too late." Gilda's eyes widened, her chest tightening. "She survived," Gustavo said, "but she has nerve damage in her leg and flinches at every loud voice. She has not left her parents' house in 3 years." He rubbed his thumb along the edge of the chair arm, the movement small and tense. "I told myself that if I had walked her home myself, none of it would have happened. I told myself that my carelessness cost her everything. And I swore that I would never again put someone I love where an enemy could find them." The silence after those words felt heavy and fragile. Gilda stared at him, seeing not the feared man everyone else whispered about, but someone carrying a wound that had never healed. "Gustavo," she said softly, "I am so sorry." He looked at her, something raw behind his eyes. "That is why you cannot be known. Not to the hotel, not to the staff, not to anyone who could use you as leverage. If they see you as just a maid, they do not look twice. If they know you are my wife, they see you as a doorway to me." "But hiding me did not protect me," she replied. "It left me walking alone with that bag. If the staff had known to protect me, if your guards had known to watch my path, last night would not have happened." He pressed his lips together. "I know that now." She reached for his hand. He hesitated, then took hers gently, careful of the foreline. "Hiding is not the same as protecting," she said. "Sometimes secrecy blinds the people who want to help." He bowed his head, forehead nearly touching her hand. For a moment the room felt still, as if even the rain outside had slowed to listen. "I cannot lose you," he murmured. "I am right here," she whispered back. "But I will not be safe until the people around us know the truth. Not all of them. Just the ones who watch the doors and corridors. The ones who can shield us." Before he could answer, a knock sounded at the door. One of Gustavo's captains stepped inside, a thick folder tucked under his arm. His eyes shifted from Gilda to Gustavo, reading the tension in the room. "I have the information you asked for," he said. "We traced the calls. The one who leaked her route is confirmed." Gustavo rose from the chair slowly, his hand slipping from Gilda's grip. His expression shut down, the softness replaced by something cold and controlled. "Let me see," he said. The captain handed over the folder. A photograph was clipped to the top. Gilda could not see the face from where she lay, but she saw the captain glance at her with something like pity. "It is someone she knows," the captain said carefully. Gustavo's eyes flicked toward her, and Gilda felt the air thicken between them. Her heart pounded, waiting for the name that would change everything. The rain outside the balcony surged suddenly, drowning the captain's next words. All she caught was the sharp sound of the folder snapping open and Gustavo's quiet intake of breath. The chapter closed on that moment, the truth just out of reach, hanging like a storm still gathering its strength. By afternoon, the storm had moved inside the penthouse. "I'm going back to the hotel," Gilda said. She sat propped against the headboard, cast stretched out on pillows, hair pulled into a loose tail. The painkillers dulled the worst of the ache, but her thoughts were sharp. Gustavo stood near the balcony doors, phone in hand, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He turned at her words, eyebrows pulling together. "No," he said. "You are not." "It is where this started," she replied. "Whoever betrayed you is there. Whoever watched me take that bag, whoever decided which door I would walk through, they are not strangers on the street. They are people I pass every day." "Which is why you are staying here," he answered. "You are the one thing I will not risk again." Gilda swallowed, then lifted her chin. "You said yourself that someone inside leaked my route. They know your systems, your guards, your cameras. They might still be watching. Your men see threats. I see faces. Let me help." He stared at her for a long moment. Rain beaded on the glass behind him, the city beyond a blur of gray shapes. "If I bring you back now, they will smell blood," he said. "They will know you survived. They will try again. Not if they think this was a stupid accident," she said quickly. "A fall on the laundry stairs. That is what staff will hear. That is what we tell them. I go in a wheelchair. I let them pity me, and I watch who looks too relieved, who looks too nervous. You want names? Let me look." A muscle jumped in his jaw. She could see the war behind his eyes, instinct pulling him to lock her away, logic reminding him that she had already paid the price for other people's secrets. "You step out of that car, and you do not walk around alone," he said finally. "You speak to who I tell you, you go where I say, and if I think for a second that something is off, I will carry you back out myself." Gilda exhaled slowly. "Agreed." He came to the bed, resting a hand on the edge of the mattress. "We tell them you slipped on wet stairs," he said. "Nothing about alleys. Nothing about 4 men. And nothing about being your wife," she added quietly. His eyes softened, regret flickering there. "Not yet." He left to arrange the details. Within an hour, 2 of his men arrived with a wheelchair, their faces carefully neutral. They lifted her from the bed with practiced care, easing her into the seat and adjusting the leg rest so the cast sat safely. The ride to the hotel was shorter than she expected. Traffic parted for Gustavo's car, the way people stepped aside for him in corridors. Gilda watched the familiar streets slide past, the tall shape of the hotel rising ahead, its glass catching what little light the cloudy day offered. Her hands tightened on the armrests as they swept into the service entrance. The moment they rolled her through the staff door, heads turned. Conversations in the corridor faltered. "Gilda," one of the other maids gasped, eyes wide. "What happened to you?" "Stairs," Gilda said, forcing a small, rueful smile. "I slipped with a basket of towels. My own fault." Sympathy washed over the faces around her. A cook poked his head out from the kitchen, shaking his head. "You have to be careful, ragazza," he said. "Those steps are a death trap when they are wet." No one mentioned alleys. No one said anything about men waiting outside. The lie slid into place almost too easily. From the end of the hall, the night manager approached, the same man who had handed her the black leather bag only hours before her world shattered. Today he wore a crisp shirt and a tie slightly loosened at the collar, as if he had been working longer than the clock allowed. "Gilda," he said, voice full of concern. "I heard you were injured. I cannot believe it." He crouched a little to meet her eyes, hand resting lightly on the wheelchair handle. "Are you in much pain?" "A little," she answered. "The doctors say if I rest, it will heal." "I brought you tea," he said. A paper cup appeared in his other hand, steam curling from the lid. Herbal. Calming. You must have had quite a scare. She accepted the cup, fingers brushing his briefly. His skin was cool and dry. Where will you stay while you recover? He asked, tone casual, eyes too intent. The dorms are crowded. You should not be on the stairs. I will be at a clinic for a while, she replied, echoing the cover story Gustavo had prepared. After that, I do not know yet. Let me know if you need anything, he said, straightening. We will keep your position. You do not have to worry about that. It sounded kind. It always had. Still, as he walked away, she noticed how his shoulders tensed when one of Gustavo's security men passed in the opposite direction. His gaze flicked toward the back entrance, then away too quickly. Gilda took a breath. Even small details felt like clues now. Gustavo appeared beside her, flanked by two of his men. From the way he moved, it was clear he belonged to this space even more in daylight than at night. Staff nodded, stepping out of his path. We will start where your shift ended, he told her. You tell me everyone who saw you with that bag. They rolled her through the service corridors she knew by heart. Today, every corner looked different. At the staff cafeteria, she pointed to the clock. I checked the time there before the manager called me. They moved to the office where the bag had been handed over. The door was open now, empty of people. Gilda stared at the threshold, remembering the weight of leather in her hands. The way the manager had said she was trustworthy. I did not think it was strange at the time, she said. He has given staff errands before, but he kept checking his watch that night. And when he handed me the bag, he glanced toward the loading dock, as if making sure someone was still there. Gustavo's eyes narrowed. You are certain? She nodded slowly. I thought he was just tired. Now I'm not sure. They pushed on, past the laundry, into the corridor leading to the back exit. Here, the air was cooler, tinged with the smell of damp concrete. There, she said, pointing toward a side door. That door to the storage yard is usually locked after midnight. It was propped open that night with a crate. I remember because I almost tripped. The door was locked now, a metal bar across it. One of Gustavo's men tested it, then exchanged a look with the other. And that camera, Gilda added, tipping her chin toward a black dome mounted in the corner near the exit. The little red light was off. It is usually on. Security said it was down for maintenance, Gustavo muttered. Convenient again. A guard stood near the back door, hands clasped behind his back. Gilda recognized him. He had been on duty the night of the attack. Today, he shifted his weight from foot to foot, eyes avoiding hers. Were you posted here 2 nights ago? Gustavo asked him. Yes, boss, the guard said, throat bobbing. You see my maid leave with a bag? The guard hesitated. I saw her pass, yes. And 4 strangers waiting near the loading bay. His gaze slid toward the wall. It was dark. I did not notice anyone unusual. Gustavo took a step closer. The guard swallowed again, sweat breaking along his hairline. We will discuss your eyesight later, Gustavo said coldly. Gilda felt the tension thicken. She did not speak, but she filed away the image of the man's face, the way guilt and fear twisted together there. While she traced her route and the small betrayals of doors and cameras, Gustavo waged a parallel battle upstairs. In a private office overlooking the main lobby, the official hotel managers sat around a polished table, their hands folded, eyes alert. None of them were syndicate men. On paper, they were professionals hired to run a prestigious property. They pretended not to know who truly owned the building. The accident in the staff area will be handled internally, Gustavo said, his tone clipped. What I want now are clear answers about procedures. One of the senior managers cleared his throat. Of course, sir. We have already filed a report about the fall in the stairwell. We will add more non-slip strips and signage. I'm not talking about stairs, Gustavo replied. I'm talking about security. Who was in charge of staff access at the time? Who had keys to the office where that bag was kept? I want every name. The managers shifted uncomfortably. As you know, the night manager oversees that floor. Another said carefully. Under him, there are 3 assistant supervisors and 2 guards on rotation. Bring me the logs, Gustavo said. Entry cards, camera reports, and if I find any gaps, I will assume they were there for a reason. Downstairs, he met with his own security chief in a smaller room. The door closed, voices lower. "You told me those alleys were covered," he said. "You told me no one could wait outside my hotel without you knowing." "They were covered," the chief said, eyes hard, until someone inside switched off that camera feed and adjusted the patrol routes. "Whoever did this used our own routines against us." Gustavo's fist tightened. "Then we changed the routines. All of them. Until this is resolved, no staff walks home alone. No cameras are left offline. And if you find one, I want to know exactly who signed the order." The chief nodded. "Understood." Later, when the wheelchair was rolled into a quiet meeting room off the service corridor, Gilda found herself at the center of a circle she did not want but could not refuse. Gustavo, his security chief, and two of his men stood nearby. "We closed the rear alley completely," Gustavo said. "No one uses it. We reroute all staff through the front until I'm satisfied that we have caught every rat in the walls." "That will cause problems," the security chief replied. "Deliveries will back up. Drivers will complain. The police might start asking questions if we block that much space without explanation." "Let them complain," Gustavo snapped. "I am not losing another person because it is inconvenient to change a door." Gilda's fingers tightened on the armrests. "Gustavo." He looked at her, impatience still sharp around his eyes. "If you shut down half the building overnight, everyone will know something serious happened," she said. "Workers will panic. They will talk. The story will grow bigger with each retelling. You will not be able to control it." "Better gossip than another attack," he replied. "Not if the gossip brings police who start digging in the wrong places," she said softly. "Or reporters who cannot let a story go. You told me secrecy is how you survive. You cannot throw that away in a fit of anger." A flicker of surprise crossed the faces of his men. They were not used to hearing anyone argue with him like this, certainly not a woman in a wheelchair wearing a maid's uniform. Gustavo's gaze held hers. The storm in him did not vanish, but it shifted. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "Change the patrols quietly," she said. "Add more guards near the staff exits, but tell people it is because of a theft in the car park. Keep the cameras on, not off. And talk to the staff, the ones who have been here longest. They know who loiters where they should not, who asks odd questions. You have men who know crime. Use the eyes of those who know the building." Silence stretched. Then the security chief spoke. "She's not wrong, boss. People will talk, but if they think it is about stolen wallets and not about her, they might tell us more freely." Gustavo exhaled slowly. "Fine. We do it her way. For now." He turned back to Gilda, a hint of reluctant respect in his eyes. "But we still find the leak. And when we do, there will be no quiet solutions." Later that afternoon, one of his men hurried into the meeting room carrying a tablet. "We pulled footage from a street camera on the corner by the loading bay," he said. "You need to see this." They gathered around as he set the tablet on the table and brought up the video. It was grainy, washed with streetlight glare, but clear enough to make out shapes. "There," the man said, tapping the screen. "Side alley, behind the hotel, 30 minutes before the staff shift ended." For figures loitered near the mouth of the alley, shoulders hunched against the drizzle. Even in blurred monochrome, Gilda recognized their stances, the bald head turned toward the street, the tall man leaning on the wall, the one with the hood checking his phone. The timestamp in the corner ticked closer to the minute she had left the building. "Watch," the guard said. A new figure appeared at the edge of the frame, stepping out of the staff door and into the rain. He wore a familiar shirt and tie, hand raised to shield his face as he glanced toward the alley. The night manager. He paused there, pulling out his phone, his shoulders angled toward the waiting men. A moment later, the four figures straightened, checking their own phones almost in unison. Then the manager turned away, walking briskly out of the camera's view. Seconds later, the small figure of a woman in a raincoat emerged from the staff door, a bag over her shoulder, and began to cross the screen. The video froze on that image. Gilda caught mid-step, unaware of the net closing around her, and the man who had sent her into it just disappearing from the edge of the frame. No one spoke for several seconds. The room felt small, air thick around the tablet screen. Gilda's fingers dug into the armrests of her wheelchair. She could not tear her eyes away from her own frozen figure, from the manager's blurred profile as he turned away. Gustavo stared as if he could burn the pixels from the glass. "That is enough," he said at last. His voice was quiet, which only made it more dangerous. "Turn it off." The guard tapped the screen, and the image vanished, replaced by a reflection of all their faces. Gilda let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Seeing the proof hurt more than she had expected. It was one thing to suspect betrayal. It was another to watch it frame by frame. "He knew exactly when I would walk out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Gustavo looked at her, and for a moment she saw a flash of guilt in his eyes, as if he blamed himself for trusting anyone with that bag. "I'm going to speak to the men who laid hands on you," he said. Her stomach twisted. She had tried not to think about them beyond the first night, beyond the vague understanding that they were somewhere in his world, being dealt with in ways she did not want described. "You have already punished them," she said carefully. "I hurt them," he replied. "I have not yet made them talk." She swallowed. "You do not need me for that." He hesitated. "Maybe I do." She stared at him. "What?" "They know what they did," he said. "You are the one they thought would never walk again." Sometimes a man speaks faster when he has to look at what he has broken. The thought of being in the same room with those four again made her skin crawl. Yet another part of her, the part still lying in that alley on the wet stones, wanted answers with a ferocity that frightened her. "If I go," she asked slowly, "will I be safe?" "You will not be touched," he said. "Not by them. Not by anyone." Her hands trembled on the armrests, but she found herself nodding. "Then take me." Asterisk. The warehouse sat on the edge of the docks, far from the polished marble of the hotel. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of oil, metal, and old dust. High windows let in narrow stripes of light, cutting across stacked crates and concrete pillars. Gilda's wheelchair rattled slightly as one of Gustavo's men pushed her over the uneven floor. Each echoing roll of the wheels bounced against her ribs. Gustavo walked at her side, his stride steady, his presence a wall between her and everything else. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly as they approached a set of double doors at the back. "No," she admitted, "but I need to see." He nodded once, then signaled to the guard. The door swung inward. The room beyond was smaller, lit by a single lamp hanging from the ceiling. For chairs had been bolted to the floor in a line. For men were tied to them, wrists cuffed, ankles bound. Gilda knew their silhouettes before her eyes adjusted. The bald head with the scar, the tall frame in a torn bomber jacket, the thick curls and beard, the one with the lazy smirk, now split by a bruise. They looked smaller sitting down, but not less dangerous. Bruises colored their faces in heavy shades of purple and yellow. One had a bandage across his nose, another a swollen eye. Their clothes were stained with dried blood, some of it not their own. The wheelchair bumped over the threshold, and they looked up. Recognition flared in their expressions, followed quickly by different shades of emotion. Unease in one, contempt in another, calculation in a third. Gilda's chest tightened. For a heartbeat, the room dissolved and she was back in the alley, rain in her eyes, boot coming toward her leg. Her breath hitched. Her fingers found the arms of the chair and clamped down. "It is all right," Gustavo murmured at her shoulder. "You are here. They are there. They cannot move." She latched onto that simple fact. For chairs. For sets of cuffs. For men who could not take a step toward her. The bald man's lip curled. "You brought her," he scoffed, his voice hoarse. "To watch." Gustavo turned his head slowly, fixing him with a stare. "Careful." The words were mild. The tone was not. Whatever the bald man had been about to say died on his tongue. He shifted his gaze away. Gilda swallowed and forced herself to meet their eyes, one by one. "You remember me," she said. "The man with the bruised," I snorted. "Hard to forget someone who squealed that loud." She flinched. Gustavo took a single step forward. The lamp light caught the edges of his expression and sharpened it. "You will address her with respect," he said, "or you will learn how little your tongue matters to me." Silence settled like dust. Gilda steadied her breathing. "I want to know why," she said. "Why me? Why that alley? Why that night?" "They will tell you," Gustavo said, "one way or another." He moved to stand in front of the first man, hands clasped behind his back, calm and unforgiving. "You know who I am," he said. "You know what happens to people who cross me." Remember that before you waste my time with lies. The bald man licked his split lip, then lifted his chin. We did a job. That is all. Who gave you that job? He hesitated. Gustavo nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward and pressed a hand hard onto the man's already bruised shoulder. A muffled groan escaped his throat. Try again, Gustavo said. A contact, the bald man gritted out. Calls himself Nero. We never saw his real face. He met us in a bar, told us there would be a girl leaving a fancy hotel with a bag. Said the bag would be worth our time. Nero, Gustavo repeated. Everyone uses that name when they do not want to admit who they work for. What else? He gave us a description. The man continued, darting a glance toward Gilda. Small, dark hair, maid's uniform, black coat. Said she takes the back way because she is tired. Said she does what she is told, will not make trouble. He smirked faintly. We were told wrong about that last part. The guard's hand tightened warningly on his shoulder. The smirk faded. What about the bag? Gustavo asked. Did he tell you what was inside? Just that it was important paperwork. Ledgers. Cash. Belonged to someone who would be very angry to lose it. Did he say who? No. Gustavo's jaw hardened. And the instructions about her leg? The air in the room thickened. Gilda waited, every muscle tense. The man with the bruised, I spoke up, voice rough. Nero said we would get extra if we made sure she could not walk for a while. Said it would slow down deliveries, cause trouble inside. Teach her a lesson, he called it. He did not say kill her. He said make sure she remembers. Gilda's stomach rolled. Gustavo's gaze shifted to the second man, the one with the curls and beard. You agree? He shrugged as much as the cuffs allowed. We did not know she was yours. We were told she was nobody. A delivery girl. Easy money. He looked at Gilda, then, something almost like apology flickering behind the hardness in his eyes. If we had known she had your name, we would have walked the other way. That is supposed to make me feel better? She asked quietly. He looked away. Gustavo took a slow breath. Who inside my hotel gave Nero her route? They hesitated. One tried to twist his cuffs as if he might somehow slip free. Another stared at the ceiling. Do not insult me, Gustavo said. You did not just happen to be in that alley at that time, looking for that bag. Someone told you when she would leave and what door she would use. The man in the bomber jacket, who had been silent until now, gave a humorless laugh. You already know, boss. You would not have brought her here if you did not. Say it, Gustavo replied. Little man with the tired eyes, the bomber jacket man said. Always checking his watch. Always near the staff door. Talks like he cares about the workers, but he counts his own coins first. Gilda's mouth went dry. The night manager, she whispered. The bald man shrugged. We never heard his real name. Nero said there was a friend inside, someone who handled staff schedules and cash. Called him the watchman. Said he kept an eye on which girl walked where. That is all we know. Watchman. The nickname slid into place with everything she had seen. The way the manager stood by the office door at odd hours, how he watched the loading bay when he thought no one noticed, how he had known she would pass through that alley. Gilda looked at Gustavo. His face was carved from stone. These four are small pieces, he said quietly to her. Cheap hands for hire. The man who hired them and the one who sold them your route are the ones who thought they could open my chest and take what they liked. The men in the chairs shifted uneasily. You should have chosen a different job, Gustavo told them. Out of all the bags in this city, you grabbed mine. Anger coiled through Gilda, hot and sharp. She remembered their laughter in the alley, the way they had spoken about her, as if she were an object, a task, not a person. What do you plan to do with them? She asked. Whatever I like, Gustavo said. They broke your leg for money. They would have left you to die. There should be a price for that. The man with the bruised, I lifted his head. We gave you what we know. That has to count for something. Gustavo's gaze swept over them, cold and assessing. You think information cancels out what you did to her? Gilda's fingers tightened again on the chair. The thought of these men walking free made her ill. Yet the idea of more violence, of blood pooling on a warehouse floor, twisted something inside her in a different way. Gustavo, she said softly. He looked down at her. If you kill them now, what happens? She asked. You feel better for an hour? A day? Does it stop Nero? Does it pull the watchman out of his office? Or does it just give them a reason to send more men with longer knives? His eyes flashed. You are saying they should live? I am saying they should be useful, she replied, voice shaking but steady. Use them to send a message to the one who hired them. Let them carry fear back to him. Let him know you are coming. And keep them breathing long enough to see what he does next. His men exchanged startled glances. None of them had expected Mercy to enter this room. They shattered your leg, Gustavo reminded her. I know, she said. Every time I move, I know. And I still want the one who gave them that order more than I want anything done to them. She looked at the four bound men, forcing herself not to flinch. You wanted money, she said to them. You did not care what happened to me. Now you will work for something else. You will carry the story of what you saw in that alley and in this room back to your employer. You will tell him he did not just steal from a hotel. He touched the wrong woman. The bald man shifted nervously. And if we refuse? Gustavo's expression did not change. You will not refuse. Silence settled again, heavy and final. At last, Gustavo sighed, the sound soft but sharp-edged. You asked me to show restraint in front of the men who broke you, he said to Gilda. You realize what that looks like to my people. She held his gaze. It looks like you're thinking 2 steps ahead. It looks like you're more dangerous than anyone who acts on rage alone. A faint, humorless smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. You always did see more than most. He turned to his captain. Keep them contained. No visitors, no calls, nothing in or out without my order. We will decide how to use them when I have spoken to our friend at the hotel. The captain nodded. Yes, boss. Gustavo glanced back at the 4 men. Whatever mercy Gilda had appealed to did not reach his eyes when he spoke to them. Understand this, he said. You are alive right now because my wife asked me to keep you that way. Do not mistake that for forgiveness. You exist to serve a purpose, and when that purpose ends, so does my patience. The word wife hung in the air like a bell toll, shocking the guards and the men in the chairs alike. Only Gilda did not flinch at it. Gustavo stepped behind her wheelchair and took hold of the handles himself. We're done here, he said. He pushed her out of the room, the heavy door closing behind them with a resonant thud. The warehouse swallowed the sound. In the corridor, his captain jogged a few steps to keep up. Boss, what next? Gustavo did not slow. Set up a meeting with our night manager at the hotel, he said. Tell him I want to discuss staff safety and security. Make it sound routine. Should I mention her? The captain asked, nodding toward Gilda. No, Gustavo replied. He does not need to know she will be there. Gilda felt the wheels glide over the concrete, carrying her toward a confrontation that would be very different from the one in the alley. This time she would not be the girl walking alone into a trap. She would be sitting beside the man who owned the street, and together they would close the net in the other direction. The next evening, the hotel hummed with its usual life. Guests checked in at the marble front desk, their luggage rolling across polished floors. Staff moved through the lobby in practice patterns, smiles fixed in place. On the surface, nothing had changed. Behind that surface, everything had. In a quiet meeting room off one of the executive corridors, a polished table waited. A carafe of water sat in the center beside a neat stack of notepads and pens, as if the gathering were nothing more than a standard review of procedures. Gustavo stood at the window, looking down at the street. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, maroon suit pressed, shirt open at the collar. He looked composed. Only the tightness around his mouth gave away the storm he held in. His captain stood near the door. He is on his way up, he said. We told him it was about staff safety and exit routes after Gilda's accident. Gustavo's jaw flexed. Good. Let him think this is routine. On the other side of the wall, Gilda sat in a small adjoining room, the wheelchair positioned in front of a dark-tinted panel that allowed her to see into the meeting space without being seen. One of Gustavo's men had shown her the mechanism for the hidden door, the narrow gap that would open at a touch if she chose to enter. Are you sure? The guard had asked when they brought her here. Yes, she had said. I want to hear his excuses before he sees me. Now she adjusted her position, cast stretched out on the leg rest, palms resting on her knees to hide their shaking. Through the glass, she could see the door to the main room. A knock sounded. Gustavo turned. Come in, he called. The night manager stepped inside. He had changed his tie, but Gilda recognized the same weary professionalism he wore like a second skin. His hair was neatly combed, his expression arranged into respectful attentiveness. Still, she could see the nervousness in the way his fingers smoothed his shirt cuff, the quick dart of his gaze around the room. "Signore Faliero," he said. "You asked to see me?" "Sit," Gustavo replied, gesturing to a chair at the table. "We need to discuss what happened to one of my staff members." The manager's brow furrowed, as if he were searching his memory. "Of course. You mean the maid who fell on the stairs? I have already filed the report with internal safety. We are reviewing signage and grip strips, as requested." Gilda felt the words like sand in her teeth. Gustavo poured himself a glass of water, but did not drink it. "Yes," he said mildly. "The stairs. Tell me, how often do you think about the people who walk them?" The manager blinked. "Sir, you oversee staff assignments," Gustavo continued. "Schedules, deliveries, who carries what, where and when. You understand the movements in this building better than anyone. That is why I hired you, or rather, why I allowed you to remain when others were replaced." The manager nodded quickly. "I appreciate your trust, sir. I take the responsibility seriously." "Good," Gustavo said. "Then explain something to me. On the night of her so-called accident, a maid was given a black leather bag and told to take it to another location. Who authorized that?" The manager shifted in his seat. "I did, sir. The office was closing. We needed the items delivered. She was available and reliable. I did not think there was any risk." Gilda watched his face. He told the story smoothly, but his hands had crept together on the table, fingers twisting. "And how many people knew she would be carrying that bag through the back exit at that time?" Gustavo asked. "I told the guard on duty to expect her in case the door stuck." The manager forced a small, strained smile. "We both know those hinges are overdue for repairs." Gustavo tapped a finger against the glass of his water. "Funny, the guard does not remember that conversation." The manager swallowed. Perhaps he forgot. It was late, and they rotate often. Perhaps. Gustavo tilted his head slightly. Perhaps not. Doors propped open. Cameras mysteriously offline. Men waiting in the alley at the very moment my maid stepped outside. A chain of accidents, all linked to your decisions. The manager's smile faded. "I do not understand what you are implying, sir." "Not yet," Gustavo said. "But you will." He nodded to his captain, who opened a slim folder and slid it across the table. The manager looked down at the first page. Color drained from his face. "These are your bank records," Gustavo said. "Specifically, deposits made over the last 3 months that do not match your salary. Interesting how they appear a day or two after certain staff shifts end, after certain bags are moved." The manager licked his lips. "There must be some mistake. I have savings, family money. There is also your phone," Gustavo went on. "Your personal one that you thought you kept separate from the hotel. Repeated calls to a number registered to a shell company in a different part of the city. The same number used by a man who calls himself Nero. Does that name ring a bell?" The manager's fingers clenched around the folder. "I do not know any Nero." Gustavo's voice did not rise, but the room felt colder. "For men sitting in my warehouse say otherwise. They say a contact with access to staff schedules gave them a route. They say he liked to think of himself as a watchman who knew every corner of this building. They say he called them the night a maid left with my records and told them to be ready." The manager's breath came faster. "You are taking the word of street criminals over a loyal employee?" "You are not loyal," Gustavo said. "You are arrogant. There is a difference." From behind the glass, Gilda saw the moment denial fractured. The manager's shoulders sagged, his gaze dropping to the table. "I was underpaid," he muttered. "You treat this place like a palace, but the people who keep it running barely make enough to live. I handle cash. I see what passes through that office, and I do not touch it. Not once in years. Then a man comes along and offers me money for information I am already drowning in. You expect me to say no?" "Yes," Gustavo replied. "I do." The manager laughed once, bitter. "It was a delivery, that is all. A girl in a bag. He told me they just wanted to scare whoever carried it. Take the contents, send a message. I did not know they would break her leg." "You did not care," Gustavo corrected. You did not ask. The manager's jaw tightened. She is a maid. One girl out of dozens. You have replacements lined up outside the door. I never imagined you would take notice. Behind the glass, something in Gilda snapped. The pain, the rain, the months of invisible work, all crushed into that single sentence. She is a maid. Gustavo's expression turned to stone. You made yourself my enemy when you used my staff as bait. The manager's eyes darted to the papers. I can give back the money. I can tell you everything I know about Nero, about his people. We can work together. You need someone inside who understands both sides. Gilda pressed her hand against the panel. The need to step into the light, to make him see her as more than a line in his calculations, overpowered her urge to stay hidden. She touched the release. The narrow door beside the glass eased open with a soft click. The manager's head jerked up at the sound. He turned and saw her. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Gilda rolled forward, the wheels whispering against the carpet. She wore simple clothes, her cast stretched out in front of her, pale against the dark frame of the chair. Her face was calm, but her eyes were not. The manager lurched to his feet. You should be in hospital, he blurted. They said you fell on the stairs. For once, Gilda said they lied to protect me. She stopped a few feet from the table, positioning herself where she could see both men. Her hands rested on the wheels, steady. You recognize me, she added. Good. It would be worse if you did not remember the person you sold. His mouth opened, closed. I did not mean for this to happen. They assured me it would be quick. Frighten you? Take the bag. Nothing more. In the alley, she said, her voice very quiet. One of them held my arms while another kicked my leg until it snapped. I remember the sound. I remember the taste of rain and blood. I remember looking at their faces and realizing I was just a task to them, something they'd been paid to break. Did you think about that when you checked your account the next morning? Did you imagine what it felt like to lie there and not be able to move? Color mottled his cheeks. I told you, I did not know they would go that far. You knew they were not the kind of men who deliver flowers, she replied. You knew the kind of world their employer belongs to. You knew what could happen, and you took the money anyway. He looked away, gaze fixing on a point on the wall. You do not understand what it is like to scrape by here, to watch the rich walk in and out while you count every coin. They will not even put my children on the staff insurance. Nero's offer was more than I see in 6 months. Gilda's chest tightened. Once, she might have pitied that desperation. She had known what it was to send money home, to count every note. But pity did not erase what he had done. You are not the only one struggling, she said. I send money to my father every month. I work double shifts. I clean the mess of people who never learn my name. I never traded another girl's body for a bonus. That was your choice. He flinched as if she had slapped him. Enough, Gustavo said quietly. He looked at Gilda. You have heard him. What do you want me to do? The manager's eyes widened. You are letting her decide? Yes, Gustavo replied. She is the one who pays the price for our decisions. She gets a voice this time. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the muffled city noise outside. Gilda looked at the man who had sent her into that alley and thought of blood on concrete, of hands reaching for her bag, of broken glass under her cheek. Part of her wanted to nod and give Gustavo permission to do what he did best, to end this cleanly with no more questions. Another part remembered the staff in the corridors, the way fear could spread, the way one act of violence could ignite 10 more. She drew in a breath. You are finished here, she said to the manager. You will never work in this hotel again, or in any business tied to this one. Whatever life you build after this, it will not be on the backs of people you see as disposable. He stared at her. You cannot just take away my whole career. You did that yourself, she answered. When you turned this building into a hunting ground, you chose money over every person who walks these halls at night. She turned to Gustavo. He should be removed quietly. No scenes for the staff. No rumors that bring police to the doors. But everyone in your inner circle, everyone who handles security, needs to know his face and what he did, so no one ever trusts him near a worker again. Gustavo considered her, eyes searching her face. And what about punishment? He asked. You would let him walk out of here with nothing but unemployment? Gilda looked back at the manager. You trusted the wrong people and sold the wrong girl, she said. For the rest of your life, you will know that the man you tried to cheat is still breathing while you are looking over your shoulder. That is punishment too. Gustavo's mouth curved in a thin line. You hear that? He said to the manager. She gave you more mercy than I would have. But do not mistake it for kindness. You are out, not just from this hotel, from this city's safe circles. Every contact you thought you had here now knows you betrayed the wrong employer. You will not find doors open in any place that matters. Two of his men stepped forward. The manager stumbled back, panic finally breaking through. You cannot do this, he protested. I have a family. So does she, Gustavo said. You did not think of that when you pointed strangers toward her walk home. The manager's gaze flicked between them, but there was no pity to grasp. The guard seized his arms. As they dragged him toward the door, he twisted to stare at Gilda. Who are you to him? He demanded. Anger and fear tangled in his voice. Gilda held his stare. The maid you thought was nobody, she said. That was your last mistake. The door closed behind him, the sound final and heavy. For a moment, silence stretched. Then Gustavo spoke, not just to her, but to every man in the room. From this day, he said, if the matter touches Gilda, her word carries weight. You understand? Security, staffing, who stays, who goes. She speaks, you listen. The captain nodded, expression sober. Yes, boss. Gilda felt the shift like a subtle change in pressure, as if the building itself had taken a breath. She had stepped from the line of quiet workers into a place where decisions were made, and this time she had not been pushed. She had rolled there on her own. She knew the manager's fate beyond the hotel would not be easy. She knew Gustavo would still decide what message to send to Nero and his people. But as the meeting room emptied and she sat with him in the quiet that followed, one thing stood clear. She was no longer just the girl who begged for help in the rain. She was the woman whose voice the boss had chosen to put beside his own. What she had not chosen was how much her leg would fight her for every inch of progress. The first day of physical therapy, the room smelled of disinfectant and rubber mats. White walls, big windows, metal bars fixed along one side. Gilda sat at the edge of a padded table, cast replaced by a sturdy brace that locked around her calf and shin. The therapist, a calm woman with sharp eyes, adjusted the straps and stepped back. We will start with standing, she said. Only standing. No heroics. Standing sounded simple enough until Gilda tried it. Her good foot found the ground. Her right leg touched down more cautiously, weight sending a jolt of warning up bone and scar tissue. Her fingers clamped around the parallel bars on either side. Slowly, the therapist reminded her, shift your weight a little. Let the leg remember it can hold you. Gilda inhaled, exhaled, and eased pressure onto her injured leg. Fire lit behind her knee. Her thigh trembled. Sweat broke along her spine. For a moment, pain crowded out everything else. The alley flashed in her mind, the sound of bones snapping, the world tilting. Panic lurched in her chest. You are not there, the therapist said quietly, as if she could read every thought. You are here, in a warm room, on dry ground, with people watching you who want you to succeed. A second voice came from the doorway, and one of them is me. Gustavo's reflection appeared in the wall mirror before she turned her head. He stepped into the room, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie absent. He looked like he had walked out of a meeting and come straight here, which he probably had. You should be working, Gilda managed through clenched teeth. I am, he said. You are my work today. The therapist hid a small smile and moved closer. Hold the bars, she instructed. Look straight ahead, not at the floor. Your body follows your eyes. Gilda focused on her own reflection. A pale woman stared back, hair pulled back, jaw tight, braced legs slightly bent. She had stood without thinking 1,000 times in her life. Now, every centimeter up felt like climbing a hill. She pushed. Her right foot pressed down. Muscle screamed. For a second, she thought she would collapse. Then, slowly, her spine straightened. She lifted herself fully off the table, both feet on the mat, the bars holding her upright. She was standing. The room did not cheer. The therapist just nodded, satisfied. Gustavo's hand rested lightly on the bar beside hers, close enough that she could feel his presence without him touching her. Again, the therapist said. By the end of the session, Gilda was trembling with exhaustion, shirt damp, hair sticking to her neck. The therapist helped her back into the wheelchair and scribbled notes on a chart. "You did well," she said. "The pain will make you think you cannot. Your leg will argue with you. Ignore it when it tells you the story is over. It is not." In the car home, Gilda leaned her head against the seat, eyes closed. "What if I never walk normally again?" she asked softly. Gustavo's hand covered hers where it rested in her lap. "You will," he said. "You do not know that." "I know you," he replied. "You do not give up." She did not answer, but she held on to his hand a little tighter. Asterisk. Rehab became a rhythm. Mornings with exercises and measured steps, afternoons for rest, evenings at the penthouse where the world felt smaller and kinder. At home, Gustavo was different from the man who filled meeting rooms and warehouses. He moved more slowly, shoulders less tense, as if the weight he carried outside could be set down at the door. The first night after therapy, he appeared from the kitchen with a plate in each hand. "You cook?" Gilda asked, surprised. He smirked faintly. "Do you think I've lived all these years only eating restaurant food and takeout?" He made a simple meal: grilled fish, roasted vegetables, rice. Nothing fancy, but the smell filled the small dining area with warmth. He set her plate down, then adjusted her chair so she could reach comfortably. "My mother taught me enough that I do not starve the power structures of the city collapse," he said. She laughed despite herself, then winced as a muscle in her leg protested the movement. He noticed, gaze softening. "Eat," he said. "You need strength for the next round with the bars." Sometimes, when she woke from a nightmare, she would find him on the balcony, speaking in low tones into his phone or just staring at the lights of the city. He would come back to the bed when he saw her awake, pretend he had not been watching for the smallest sound. They talked more in those quiet evenings than they ever had in the corridors of the hotel. About his parents and the restaurant they once ran. About her father and his stubborn refusal to rest. About the kind of life neither of them had ever imagined but now shared. Outside their walls, changes rippled through the Faliero Regent. Security protocols tightened, not in loud, obvious ways, but in small, deliberate shifts. Cameras that had once been ignored were now checked daily. Guard rotations changed, routes varied. The alley where Gilda had fallen was no longer used as a staff shortcut at night. Under Gustavo's orders, an anonymous reporting system was set up. Maids and cleaners, dishwashers and porters could slip notes in locked boxes if they felt unsafe, if a guest crossed a line, if a supervisor abused power. The notes went straight to a small team of trusted people, bypassing anyone who might wish to bury them. Gilda pushed for more. "Most of the girls have never been taught how to defend themselves," she told him one night. "They think they are supposed to endure whatever comes with the job. That has to change." "What do you suggest?" he asked. "Self-protection classes," she said. "Not just for security. For maids. For laundry staff. Teach them how to break a grip, how to shout in ways people cannot ignore. Give them options." He considered it. "If I bring in trainers, it will raise questions." "Tell them it is about empowerment," she said. "You want your staff to feel strong. Happy workers, happy reviews." He smiled a little at that. "You know how to make a threat sound like a marketing strategy." The next month, quietly, optional training sessions appeared on the staff board. No one was forced to attend. Many did. Gilda heard later from her old roommates how strange it felt, learning to twist out of someone's grip on a padded mat instead of shrinking away from it in a corridor. Strange, but good. Another shift came in meetings. At first, Gustavo invited her to sit in only on discussions that touched directly on staff safety. She would watch from a corner of the room as he debated with his lieutenants, weighing risk against reward, power against peace. "You do not have to be here," he told her once, noticing the way she rubbed her leg after a long session. "I know," she said. "I want to be." Slowly, he stopped placing her in corners. Her wheelchair moved closer to the table. He began to ask, "How would this land with the workers? Or what do you see that we do not?" The men around him were not all quick to accept her presence. Some frowned when she spoke, their eyes snagging on her maid's calloused hands, on the brace peeking from under her trousers. Others avoided meeting her gaze, as if to look too long was to acknowledge that the boss trusted someone they had once dismissed. It did not stay that way. They had seen her at the confrontation with the manager. They had heard the way Gustavo had deferred to her judgment, when she suggested alternate patrol routes or pointed out blind spots in stairwells and service corridors. Her ideas saved them work and trouble. Results softened resistance. One evening, after a tense planning session about dealing with Nero's people, one of the older lieutenants paused as he passed her. "You see things we miss," he said grudgingly. "Different angles." "Because I walked them," she answered. He nodded once, a small acknowledgement, then moved on. At home, as the days lengthened and the bruises on her soul faded to something less raw, another question began to press against Gilda's thoughts. "What happens when I can walk again?" she asked Gustavo one night, when rain pattered softly against the balcony and a half-finished bottle of wine sat between them. He leaned back in his chair. "You will not need the wheelchair." "I mean here," she said. "At the hotel. Do I go back to changing sheets like nothing happened? Do I stay in the maid's uniform forever, while the people who try to destroy us whisper from the shadows?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I never wanted you to wear that uniform in the first place," he said at last. "Not after the chapel. I wanted to give you something better. An office. A title. You insisted on staying where you were. Because my family needed the money," she said. "And because I did not want to be a symbol. I wanted to be useful." He nodded. "And because I was afraid." She looked at him. "Afraid of what?" "That putting you where you belong would paint a target on your back, like Leah," he said. "So I convinced both of us that hiding you was the same as protecting you." "It was not," she said, but her tone held no accusation, only truth. "No," he agreed. "It was not." He reached across the table, took her hand. "You ask what happens when you walk again. I think you should decide. Do you want to go back to the linen carts? Or do you want a role that matches what you already are?" "And what is that?" she asked. "The person who can walk into any room in this building and understand every level of it," he said, "from the dishwashers to the politicians upstairs. You are the only one I trust to tell me when I'm blind to something." Warmth and fear twisted together in her chest. Accepting meant stepping into light, into real danger. It also meant no more pretending to be small. "I do not want to be a ghost in my own life anymore," she said quietly. "Then do not," he replied. "When you can walk again, we tell them. All of them. Not just my men. The managers. The staff. The guests who think they own this place because they pay for the best suites." "The truth," she said. His thumb brushed her knuckles. "The truth. That Gilda Faliero is not just their maid. She's my wife, and she has survived something that would have broken any of them." Her throat tightened. "And you will stand beside me when we do." "I will stand where you want me," he said. "Beside you, behind you, or one step ahead if you feel like kicking someone on the way." She laughed, the sound breaking the heaviness in the room. Asterisk. The day she first took steps with a cane, the rehab center felt different. The brace was still on her leg, but the parallel bars were gone. In their place, the therapist handed her a simple, polished cane, its handle smooth under her palm. "We will walk from this wall to that one," the woman said. "No more, no less." It looked impossibly far. Gilda glanced toward the doorway. Gustavo stood there, arms folded, trying and failing to hide how closely he was watching. She pressed the cane to the floor, shifted her weight, and took a step. Pain flared, but it did not own her. She took another step, each movement careful and deliberate. The room narrowed to the sound of rubber tip against tile, the slide of her foot, the rhythm of her breathing. Halfway across, her leg shook so hard she thought it would give. She stopped, closed her eyes for a second, heard the echo of boots in an alley, and replaced it with a faint encouragement in the therapist's voice and the silent support in Gustavo's gaze. She moved again. When her hand finally met the far wall, she let out a breath that trembled from somewhere deep. "You did it," the therapist said. "Turn around and look." Gilda turned slowly. The path she had just walked looked longer now, marked in the memory of each step. Gustavo's eyes shone, pride and something like awe in them. He crossed the distance she had just conquered in 3 strides, but he did not reach for her without asking. "May I?" he said. She nodded, and he slid an arm around her shoulders, careful not to unbalance her. "That is the last time you'll cross a room wondering if you can," he said quietly. "From now on, each one will just be proof of what you already know." Later, back at the penthouse, as they sat together and the city lights blinked on below, he spoke again. "The night you can walk across the hotel lobby on your own," he said, "will be the end of hiding. That will be the night they see exactly who you are. We will start there." Gilda looked at her leg, at the cane leaning within reach, at the world that had hurt her and was now slowly, carefully being reshaped around her. "One step at a time," she said. "One step at a time," Gustavo agreed. And somewhere in the polished halls of the Faliero Regent, the lobby waited, wide and bright, for the day its staff and guests would see the woman who had once only pushed carts and changed sheets walk through its center and claim her place in full view. That day arrived with rain. Outside, the sky hung low and heavy, clouds spilling water over the city in steady silver lines. Car headlights streaked across wet asphalt. Umbrellas bloomed and vanished at the entrance of the hotel like dark flowers. Inside the penthouse, Gilda stood in front of a mirror. No brace, no wheelchair, only a faint scar tracing pale lines along her leg, mostly hidden by the hem of her dress. She dressed carefully, not like a maid reporting for duty, but like a woman stepping into a life that finally fit. The dress she chose was simple and dark, cut to let her move easily. Her hair fell loose over her shoulders, still damp from the shower, but curling softly at the ends. Her cane leaned against the wall nearby. Some days she needed it. Tonight, she had decided to walk without it. Her leg ached with the change in weather, but the pain felt like an old echo instead of a fresh wound. Gustavo waited by the door, maroon suit immaculate, tie forgotten on a chair. He watched her cross the room toward him, each step measured but hers. "You are sure?" he asked quietly. Gilda nodded. "This started on a night like this. It can end on one too." He opened the door and offered his arm. She slid her hand into the crook of his elbow. Together, they stepped into the private elevator that would take them down, not to the service level, but to the floor that opened directly onto the main lobby. The elevator hummed softly. Gilda felt every floor they passed. She remembered the service lift's chipped walls, the smell of detergent and damp linen. This cab smelled of faint cologne and polished metal. "You can still change your mind," Gustavo said. "I already did," she replied. "Once I chose to be invisible. Tonight, I choose the opposite." The door slid open. The lobby stretched out before her, bright and gleaming, light glancing off marble and glass. Guests moved between armchairs and reception desks. Staff glided between them in dark uniforms, carrying trays, handling luggage, offering polite smiles. The kind of scene she had watched from doorways and side corridors, never from the center. For a moment, the noise and motion blurred at the edges. She felt the same pull of gravity that had dragged her down in the alley, but this time it came from the weight of eyes, of memory. Gustavo's hand tightened slightly on her arm. "Look at me," he murmured. She did. "You are not walking into an ambush," he said. "You are walking into your own lobby." She drew in a breath, then another. The ache in her leg flared, then settled. One step, then another. They moved forward. A few staff members noticed first. A maid carrying a stack of towels paused, eyes widening as she recognized Gilda. Two bellboys who had once joked with her in the back corridors went still, watching as she passed. A receptionist's polite smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face when she saw who walked beside the boss. Whispers rose, soft as the patter of rain on the windows. "Is that Gilda? She is walking. Why is she with him?" In the center of the lobby, near the large arrangement of fresh flowers that changed each week, a small group waited. The senior manager's security chief, a handful of key staff. They had been told to gather for an announcement from the owner. None of them had been told about her. Gustavo stopped beside the flowers and let go of her arm. For the first time since stepping out of the elevator, Gilda stood alone, weight balanced evenly, no card in her hands, no bag over her shoulder. The lobby seemed to inhale. "Thank you for coming," Gustavo said, voice carrying clearly. Conversations around the room dipped, then hushed. Even some guests turned to listen. He rarely spoke in public spaces. When he did, people paid attention. I called you here because there has been a lie at the center of this building, he continued. One I allowed, and one that almost cost me everything. He looked at Gilda, then back at the staff. You know her as Gilda, he said. Many of you have seen her cleaning your rooms, changing sheets, running when supervisors shouted. Some of you never learn her name. You will learn it properly now. This is my wife, Mrs. Faliero. The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples through the room. Gasps. A dropped clipboard. The clink of a glass hitting a saucer too hard. The head of housekeeping stared, mouth parted. The receptionist who had once sent Gilda to re-clean a room 3 times went pale. A porter lowered his eyes with sudden respect. Others looked frightened, replaying every word they had ever spoken near her, every time they had ignored her. Gilda felt the shock like heat on her skin. She could have let it wash over her and pass through it with her head down, but that was the old habit. Tonight, she lifted her chin. Some of you have treated her with kindness without knowing who she is, Gustavo said. You will continue to treat her with kindness. Others have treated her as less than you. You will adjust. There was no threat in his tone. It did not need one. From this night, he went on, if she speaks to you on a matter of staff safety, you will listen as you would listen to me. She has walked your corridors. She has changed beds in the smallest rooms and stood in the largest suites. She knows this building in ways none of you do. Gilda could feel their eyes, their confusion, their reluctant admiration, their fear. It might have crushed her once. Now it felt like a footprint on soft earth, not a boot on her chest. Later, when the formalities ended and staff moved back to their posts, the questions followed in quieter currents. A maid approached her near the staff door, eyes wide and shy. Madam, she began, then faltered. Gilda, I do not know what to call you. Gilda is fine, she said. It always has been. The girl nodded quickly. You are really his, she trailed off, blushing. Yes, Gilda said, for longer than you think. The maid glanced toward the lobby. Some people are frightened, she murmured. They think if they were rude to you, he will remember. He remembers a lot of things, Gilda said. So do I. But I also remember who spoke up when guests crossed lines, who helped carry heavy carts when no one was watching. Those are the people I listen to now. The maid straightened a little at that. If you ever need help, she said, you can call me. I know, Gilda replied. And she did. News of the 4 attackers and the traitor had already begun to harden into rumor by then. Stories moved through the staff quarters like smoke. Gilda heard the cleaned-up version. The men who had hurt her had been handed over to contacts far from the city, to work in harsh conditions under watchful eyes. No more alleys for them. Only endless days of labor where no one cared about their excuses. They would not come back. The manager who had betrayed her route did not vanish overnight, because disappearing people drew attention. Instead, he left quietly. Officially, he had resigned. Unofficially, every respectable hotel in the region closed its doors to him. His accounts were frozen. His contacts did not answer his calls. The last anyone heard, he had taken a job checking tickets at a distant bus station, far from places where men like Gustavo held power. Gilda did not feel joy when she heard it. She felt something sharper and cleaner. Justice, maybe, or as close as this world could get. That night, the rain finally thinned to a mist. The rooftop of the Faliero Regent glistened under low clouds. The city stretched around them, wet streets catching stray light, alleys threading between buildings like dark veins. Gilda stood at the railing, both hands wrapped around the cold metal. Her leg ached, but it held. Beside her, Gustavo rested his palms on the rail, shoulders relaxed in a way she had rarely seen before. Do you remember that night? She asked quietly. I remember every second, he replied. She looked down at the street where the alley began, just visible between the buildings. Rain had washed away the blood long ago. Cars passed. People hurried along, collars up, unaware of what that patch of wet pavement had once held. I remember the sound first, she said. The kick. Then everything after, the smell of trash, the cold, the way the water soaked through my clothes. I remember thinking no one would find me, that it was all going to end there. He turned his head slightly, watching her. But I also remember another sound, she added. An engine, a door, footsteps, and then you, standing at the end of the alley, looking like the storm had chosen a shape. He exhaled slowly. Almost lost you before I could even admit to myself what you meant, he said. I spent so long trying to keep you out of sight that I almost blinded my own people to your value. That will not happen again. No more secrets? She asked, a small smile tugging at her mouth. Not the kind that put you in the dark, he said. Protection from now on will mean we stand together, not apart. You see what I cannot. You hear what I do not. If I move too fast toward violence, you will tell me. If you move too fast toward mercy, I will tell you. We decide where to stand in between. She considered that, then nodded. I can live with that. Wind tugged at her hair, carrying the faint scent of wet asphalt and city lights. You know, she said, I will never forget the alley. I do not think I want to. It reminds me of who I was and who I am now. And who are you now? He asked. She looked out over the city that had nearly swallowed her whole, and then, strangely, given her back more than it had taken. Someone who knows what it feels like to be helpless, she said, and someone who will never let the people under this roof feel that way again, if she can help it. He slid an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, not because she could not stand alone, but because she chose not to. They stayed there for a while, watching the street below, the alley that had once been the end of her world, and was now just one more road in a city full of them. At last, Gilda straightened and stepped back from the railing. Come on, she said. We have a hotel to run. Gustavo smiled. Yes, he replied. We do. Together they turned away from the edge and walked back toward the stairwell door. Side by side, their reflections briefly doubled in the glass before the dark swallowed them, and the light inside welcomed them home. And if you were listening to this story now, watching Gilda at that railing, what would you feel? Have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be the one opening the door on your worst night? Have you ever wondered how far justice should go when someone harms the person you love most? Would you stand with Gilda, asking for consequences that reach minds more than bodies? Or with Gustavo, ready to meet violence with something just as hard? Tell your answer. Whose side are you on? And do you think the price they paid was enough, too much, or not nearly what they deserved?
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.